Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my thoughts and notes and etc. on running my intrepid group of players at my friendly local game store through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition Underdark adventure campaign. We're a good 3/4 of the way through now. Been having a lot of fun with this adventure. If you're new, this is the first time you've seen this. This isn't a blow-by-blow actual play. What it is sort of a summary of what happens during each of our sessions. I'll go through some rules clarifications, some general thoughts on DMing or GMing, role playing in general. So it's just kind of a mixed thing to really help you run Out of the Abyss, but also hopefully help you to be a better dungeon master and maybe a better player. So if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, this is not always my most viewed video series, but it gets the most engagement. So I know people get a lot of benefit out of it, which is why I keep doing it. So, okay, let's move right on ahead. We're going to do viewer feedback. And then after viewer feedback, we'll get into, some specific rules and notes, and then get into, that came out of last session, and then get into a recap of the session itself. So first thing I want to do for viewer feedback, and putting on my +3 glasses of viewer feedback here, is, let's see, Vasily Krisen had a question for video 66, which I said, hey, wait till a future video and I will do my best to address that. So, and he was talking about the Beholder's anti-magic cone and how that might interact with some stuff. So, I said, hey man, hold tight and I'll try to get into some of your specifics. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. So back in video 66, this is video 68 I'm recording now. He said, hey, I want to get your thoughts on Beholder's Central Eye and its anti-magic effect. Would you rule that it also disrupts a druid's shape change? How about a warlock summon weapon from Pact of the Blade? Not specifically to unsummon it, but rather would you allow the warlock to summon it while in the area of the effect of the cone? So this video will actually be talking very much about a beholder and its lair and what it can do, because that, as I felt would happen, the combat with the beholder, I think it's Karazikar is his name, in Out of the Abyss in the Vast Oblivium, did occur. So let's take a look at the beholder and see what it can do here. Let's see. I just had the beholder. Where did it go, I just had it. Oh, beholder, where are you? I thought I had it marked. Let's say, there it is. Yeah, I did have it marked. It just wasn't popping out on me to notice it. So we'll get more into the beholder here in a little bit, but specifically to answer the question, it says the Beholder's Central Eye creates an area of anti-magic, as in the anti-magic field spell, in a 150-foot cone. At the start of each of its turns, the Beholder decides which way the cone faces and whether the cone is active. The area works against the Beholder's own eye rays, so keep that in mind. So now what we would need to do is look up the anti-magic field spell. So let's go to the player's handbook and take a look at what the anti-magic field says. So let's go to spells, and there we go. Anti-magic field, which is an 8th level abjuration, starting on page 213 in the player's handbook. So now the thing in here, the casting time, the range, the components, the duration, all that doesn't apply, because this is not a spell. This is the Beholder's anti-magic cone effect, inherent ability emitting out of its large central eye. So let's see, targeted effects. Oh, okay, well, hold on. It says, so within the spell, or within the sphere, which in this case would be within the cone, spells can't be cast, Summoned creatures disappear, and even magic items become mundane. For example, at one point during last session, the wizard's familiar, an owl, got caught in the anti-magic cone, and it disappeared. And then as soon as it was outside of the cone, it reappeared. So until the spell ends, the sphere moves with you centered on... Okay, so ignore the sphere stuff, because some of it is talking about as if this were the spell. Spells and other magical effects, except those created by an artifact or a deity, are suppressed in the field and cannot protrude into it. All right. A slot expended to cast a suppressed spell is consumed. So if somebody's in an anti-magic field and they're like, I'm going to cast whatever, they still use up the slot, just nothing happens. While an effect is suppressed, it doesn't function, but the time it spends suppressed counts against its duration. All right. Targeted effects. Spells and other magical effects such as Magic Missile and Charm Person that target a creature or an object in the field have no effect on that target. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Now, to get into the main question from Vasily, is on page 214. It gives more examples of what would happen. Areas of magic. The area of another spell or magical effect, such as Fireball, cannot extend into the field. If the field overlaps an area of magic, the part of the area that is covered by the field is suppressed. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm changing sphere to field because we're talking about an anti-magic field cone from the beholder. For example, the flames created by a wall of fire are suppressed within the sphere or the field, creating a gap in the wall if it overlaps, if the wall it overlaps is large enough. All right, spells. Any active spell or other magical effect on a creature or an object in the field is suppressed while the creature or object is in it. So the warlock summoned weapon would disappear, best I can tell, to answer the specific. Said, how about a warlock summoned weapon from Pact of the Blade? Not only could they not summon it while they were in there, but it would also disappear while it was within the field, if I'm understanding this correct. Let's see. Magic items. The properties and powers of magic items are suppressed in the field. For example, a +1 longsword in the field functions as a non-magical longsword. A magic weapon's properties and powers are suppressed if it is used against a target in the field or wielded by an attacker in the field. If a magic weapon or a piece of magic ammunition fully leaves the field, for example, if you fire a magic arrow or throw a magic spear at a target outside the field, the magic of the item ceases to be suppressed as soon as it exits the field. Magical travel. Teleportation and planar travel fail to work in the field, whether the field is the destination or the departure point for such magical travel. A portal to another location, world, or plane of existence, as well as an opening to an extra-dimensional space, such as that created by the rope trick spell, temporarily closes while in the field. That would probably also apply, I'd guess, to a bag of holding and portable hole and that kind of thing. Which is funny because my group did use the rope trick spell during this encounter with the beholder. And it's funny that specifically mentions it in here. Creatures and objects. A creature or object summoned or created by magic temporarily winks out of existence in the sphere. There again, the blade from the Pact of the Blade, the weapon from the Pact of the Blade. Such a creature, or a creature or object summoned or created by magic temporarily winks out of existence in the sphere. Such a creature instantly reappears once the space the creature occupied is no longer within the sphere or field. Dispel magic. Spells and magical effects such as dispel magic have no effect on the sphere or field. Remember, we're talking about the beholder's cone. Likewise, the fields created by different anti-magic field spells don't nullify each other. So, there you go. And from there, you just have to use your best judgment. If a player can make a case that, hey, this should work or this shouldn't work or whatever, I'll try to listen. But you just, sometimes sometimes you're not going to have a specific answer for every little thing. You have to take the principles that have been presented and apply them as best you can. So let me look at the rest of this. A druid shape change. Yeah, because it's a magical effect. I'm going to let me look up druid real quick. But since that's an inherent magical effect that they get as part of their class feature, I'm gonna imagine that it would revert somebody to their normal state. Would be my guess. Druid, where are you, little druid? Probably have to edit this out. Druid, okay, class feature. They get wild shape at second level. So let's look up wild shape here. You can use your action to, and here's the key. This is on page 66 of the player's handbook. You can use your action to magically assume the shape of a beast that you have seen before. So to me, that's the key. The principle is, I mean, it's not some inherent biological thing that's happening that isn't magical. It's a magical ability that you get from being a druid. So the anti-magic field would suppress that. So while you're in the anti-magic field, you would revert to your normal shape. Now, I'd probably rule that once the field left you, or you left the field area or whatever, you would go back into your wild shape, because it says it affects the duration. So it would still count. Like if you were in a magic field for 5 minutes, you would still be your normal form and not your wild shape. But when you went back to your wild shape after leaving the field or whatever, those 5 minutes would still count against you, because it mentioned specifically in the spell description that the duration remains. So there you go. Let's take a look. Rob Plummer had also said in video 66, replying, he said, believe all things not magical, even magic items, those are properties while in the cone. So that is true. The pack blade shape change, yes, all of that. The mighty weapons that my party has, like wave and whelm and all that, because they're not artifacts. It doesn't say they're artifacts, even though I've argued before I think they should be, with how powerful they are nullified while they're in the anti-magic. Okay, so I hope that addresses that enough. If there's any confusion, folks, please let me know. Feel free to add your comments to the video, because this is one of those abilities or things about D&D that can get confusing or can cause some debate. So, I'd welcome your comments. And that was a great question. Vasily, I appreciate it. So, okay. Let's see. Now we're back to, let's get to the questions for 67. And normally I have a chance to go through and answer these in the video, like typing out answers before I get to recording the video. I haven't had a chance yet. So I'm actually answering these for the first time in the video. So it says, Cody Lloyd said, hey, Shane, sorry to hear about the other D&D group. I hope this never happens to me. So he's talking about, I spent quite a bit of time last video talking about a rules argument leading to a group splitting, and my thoughts on, as DMs and players, how to prevent that, and how to handle it, if that kind of thing starts coming up. He said, unfortunately, I feel there's going to be conflict in my group playstyle wise, not rules wise. Okay. But Cody is starting a new group. As I said, I had my first session at my friendly local game store. Support your friendly local game store. Amazon can't give you community. Okay. So I buy my books and I buy this and I buy that through my friendly local game store. Let's see. He said, I had my first session at my friendly local game store Saturday, and my group is acting like a bunch of charlatans. Okay. And by the way, none of them chose that background. There's a lot of mistrust between the characters, not the players, the characters, and there's sort of an everyone for themselves attitude. It is very chaotic. Usually I don't mind chaos as it adds to the game, but I feel that it is affecting some of the players' fun due to selfishness. Could use some advice before my next session. So I hope that you'll get this video before your next session. Cody, like I said, I usually try to respond in the actual video comments before now. This has been crazy lately. And Vasily actually said, Cody Lloyd, sorry to hear that, man. Basically, when I start a game, I'm assuming you're the DM, I said the table rules, and one of them is no PvP. Okay. It's fine if there's conflict with personalities, and it can make for very engaging and interesting games as long as the line isn't crossed. I agree with that. And there is no murder spree battle royale. If your players are having fun role-playing personality conflicts, I think it's okay. And, that's pretty much where I'm at. Really, even if there's PvP and backstabbing and all kinds of craziness, if everyone's having fun and everyone's okay with that, that's fine. But the DM here, Cody, is expressing concerns that I think this might end up being a problem. And then Cody said, thanks, yes, I am the DM. I had a session 0, which one of these days I'll talk about session 0. It's becoming more and more popular, and it can be a great way to start a campaign. And stated that this is a cooperative game and for fun as a group. So the DM laid that, hey, say this is a cooperative game and we're having fun for a group, or as a group. So far, they have not become physical in the game. Now, keep in mind that he's making the distinction that the players are having fun. It's the characters that are yeah-yaing with each other. They're just undermining each other when it comes to loot and information. If this tells you anything, the most trustworthy character in the party so far is the rogue assassin, which is the only character that has a background worthy to act as the others are. Okay, so here is where, Cody, there's no one-size-fits-all answer here. But I'll offer the best advice I can. First, if everyone seems to be having fun and you're still able to propel a game forward with a story, and they seem to be sort of self-policing themselves so it's not getting out of hand, that might just be the style of game that your players want. So, as a DM, if that seems to be what the case would be, then as a DM, you have to decide, am I okay running a campaign like this? Because if you're not okay running a campaign like this, it's okay to say, hey guys, this is going a different direction than I wanted, but you're having fun. Do one of y'all want to DM, and I'll start another group, and it's hard to say that kind of thing without people think that you're like, well, I'm taking my toys and going home. But I think it's possible to say, hey, you guys are having fun and that's cool. I don't want to stop that, but this isn't the type of story that I wanted to tell with you, the kind of game I wanted to have. So, if you guys want to do that, does somebody else want to DM? If it's bothering you, Cody, right? If you're like, I just can't have fun like this. Alternately, you might give it a couple of sessions and you might think that, hey, this is fun, I don't know. But you did state, now here's a key point. You stated, that you wanted, how did you state it here? You stated that this is a cooperative game and for fun as a group. So they are kind of deviating from what you wanted to try to hit, the tone you wanted to try to hit. The other thing you can do is you can start introducing, and I've been doing this in my ongoing campaign, especially with one character, is introducing in-game consequences for behavior, right? It's like, hey, if y'all want to act and behave that way, that's fine, but it might have some in-game consequences that you're not, prepared for or expecting. And maybe it might behoove you to, even if you don't like each other, to at least get along on a certain level, because you're all in this together. For example, if I had everybody, not, mistrusting each other and not being, polite with each other, or, taking advantage of loot and information and that sort of thing. I don't know. I might find a situation where they were so busy focused on each other and outdoing each other that they don't notice a very real danger, coming up on them. Or maybe you slip a doppelganger into the party, and because they're so mistrustful of each other to begin with, you don't even give them any chance to notice it's a doppelganger, just to prove a point. Maybe put an NPC in that you can use as a way to show that kind of behavior can really backfire on you. That kind of thing. I don't know. There's different ways to address it. I would try to address it through role playing rather than just saying, "Hey, you can't do that." But again, there's so many different ways to go through it. And now here's the thing: if everyone's having fun, I personally, as long as I could handle that tone of a game, I would back off a little bit, because sometimes campaigns, just like businesses and stories and movies and novels, when people sit down to write stuff or create stuff, sometimes it pivots and becomes something else. And they say, I'm kind of glad I chased that because we ended up having a really good story. So maybe pivot a little bit. But the key thing you said, if it's affecting some of the players' fun due to selfishness, if it gets to the point where some people just aren't having fun, then you do need to intervene in an out of character way and say, guys, this, or gals, or whoever, this is not the game we set out to play, and, address it that way. And if somebody's just being really egregious and just won't go along with whatever, you can blue bolt them. Boom, your character is dead. I mean, that's always in a DM's arsenal of tools, bag of tricks, arsenal of weapons, or whatever. It's a last resort. But if just one person or whatever is being that way, just blue bolt them. Bam. I ain't saying you got to leave the campaign, but that character's gone. You need another one. Make the point. But again, it's any group has its own dynamics. So on a certain level, you're going to have to kind of navigate it yourself. And the guiding principle is, for me, if people are having fun, the next thing you ask yourself, can I handle this? And if the answer is yes and yes, just go with it. If either of those answers is no, then you're going to have to talk or take some action or whatever. So, but again, I think the best way to handle it is come up with some in-game role-playing consequences for that kind of behavior. So, all right. Maybe, have an NPC hire them for a really good job. And this NPC travels with them for a couple of days. And when this NPC witnesses this kind of behavior, says, no, we're done. I can't trust a group like you, and leave them hanging with, all this huge, big, fat reward they were going to get. So that's different stuff you can do. Okay. So, and I'm probably still mispronouncing this. So, Vasily actually gave me his pronunciation. He said I said it correctly one time in video 67. But he said it's not a common name, so he doesn't mind when people mispronounce it. Okay, cool. Because I'm definitely not trying to on purpose. He says, that's too bad about the group breaking up. I've had many disagreements with a particular player. We're good friends, but once it's over, we move on. And that's, if you can do that, beautiful. It seems clear that the escalation happened in this case when the player wouldn't let it go. That's what it sounds like to me as well. Although I haven't, in transparency, I have not sat down to talk with that player to get their side of things. In Adventures League, there's an unwritten rule that when the DM makes a ruling, you move on. I mean, that's kind of the rule anyway. I mean, that's really how D&D is supposed to work. There's a great bit here in Xanathar's Guide to Everything that I think is just beautiful, where it talks about the role of the DM. So here goes on page 5 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It says, one rule overrides all others, and this is under the DM adjudicates the rules. One rule overrides all others. The DM is the final authority on how the rules work and play. Rules are a part of what makes D&D a game rather than just improvised storytelling. I've said before, this is not just storytelling, it's a game. The game's rules are meant to help organize and even inspire the action of a D&D campaign. The rules are a tool, and we want our tools to be as effective as possible. No matter how good those tools might be, they need a group of players to bring them to life and a DM to guide their use. The DM is key. Many unexpected events can occur in a D&D campaign, and no set of rules could reasonably account for every contingency. If the rules try to do so, the game would become a slog, and not to mention the books would be way thick. An alternative would be for the rules to severely limit what characters can do, which would be contrary to the open-endedness of D&D. Here's the path the game takes. It lays a foundation of rules that a DM can build on, and it embraces the DM's role as the bridge between the things the rules address and the things they don't. So there you go. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. That doesn't mean that the DM should be an iron-fisted dictator and never listen to anything the players say. But at a certain point, the referee or the DM or the GM or whatever has to say, this is how we're going to do it. And then you move on. And if it just keeps creating tension, then, either the DM can just say, okay, that's not a hill that I'm going to die on, and we'll just let it go. Or they can say, look, that's the ruling. But either way, at a certain point, the DM decides which way the river flows. So there you go. So yeah, Vast Oblivion, it is an unwritten rule, but it's also kind of a written rule. That's Wizards of the Coast themselves, that's their take on it. In D&D, they're saying, the DM is the final adjudicator. Somebody has to be, if every player in the game is an adjudicator and a final word on the rules, then you have a multi-headed monster, and that's no good. So, okay. Valendrave wrote in, and he actually went more into the investigation versus perception that led to the argument with his other group to begin with. And he said, I feel like the question of investigation versus perception is easily handled when you look at what the words themselves mean, even out of context with the game. Investigation is when we are actively searching for something. This is obviously germane to searching for traps. I agree. The key word is searching. Whenever someone is searching for traps, it is clearly an investigation check. I agree with you that there can be times when perception applies. For instance, the trap is a huge spiked log that swings from the ceiling and is not hidden in any way as the group approaches. I would allow anyone to spot it with a perception roll. Any kind of hidden trap in my game takes a blatant effort to actively search for it in order to find it. Hence, I always use investigation. This is how Valendrave handles it. Stuff like an uncovered hole in the floor or the aforementioned spike log, maybe very blatant dart holes down the length of a hallway, I would allow perception. I also agree that I would never allow a disagreement like this to escalate. Okay, so let me back up before we get into this. I agree. I think that it's usually going to be investigation to find a trap or hidden door or whatever. But there might be times when perception applies. But in general, I'm probably going to go with investigation. The problem is the way that the rules are written. It's open to interpretation, which is when you need the DM to come in. And evidently, I need to go refresh on this, but I've been told, and I've read all the way through Xanathar's. I still need to do my review on it. It's coming. Evidently, Xanathar has made it somehow more confusing. I don't know. I need to go revisit that. But anyway, I agree. It should 8 or 9 times out of 10, it should be investigation if you're looking for a trap. If you're looking for a trap, then yeah, it's going to be investigation every time. But there should be times where you maybe could potentially notice something that, that doesn't seem right. And then, you have a chance to see a trap or the hidden door, whatever. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Valendrave's opinion on the actual disagreement and how to handle it. He said he agrees he would never allow a disagreement like this to escalate. I feel like the one player should have been expelled from the group after multiple chances to let it go. Yeah, I can't speak to that because I don't know everything. Me personally, if it's that cut and dry, after a while, I'll be like, man, you either need to go along with it or you're gonna have to go because this tension is not worth it. And this was, as I understand it, the DM finally said, use either. I don't care. Let's just move forward. So if the player agrees that you are the GM, they're also agreeing to you arbitrating the rules to make the game flow as easily as possible. Again, I agree. I would probably, and have in the past, tell the player, I understand your opinion, but as the DM, I will rule that investigation is the skill that we will use. Right. I agree. And I'll tell people, like, hey, I understand that, but this is how we're going to do it. And then the key is be consistent from that point forward. And if you have to change, explain why. So that then that way that the players don't think that you're just doing everything on a whim, and then they won't respect that and they'll feel offended. or resentful. And then Valendrave goes on to say, if you cannot or will accept that, then you can leave the group, but I won't argue about it. Hopefully it won't get to that point, but there are times where you have to take it to that level. We're at a crossroads. It's one or the other, but you got to make a decision. It is a sad thing that the entire group fell apart. This is kind of crap. Maybe I could understand if it was an 8-year-old, but that type of behavior from an adult is just as ridiculous. He says just ridiculous. D&D has always brought people together and has been a powerful tool for making friends, sometimes lifelong friends. Sad to see it go this way. I agree, Valendrave. Good thoughts. Good points, good comments. Sometimes it happens. Human nature is human nature is human nature. And like I alluded to in the last video, what they're arguing about may not actually be the rules. A lot of times when you're arguing about something, you're actually arguing about something else that's deeper down, and it's coming out through that venue, or that, we're arguing about this, so it makes it worse. So what should be a minor thing blows out of proportion. So there could have been other personality dynamics and conflicts in that group that just came to a head, and the straw that broke the camel's back was the ruling and the argument over investigation versus perception for traps. But the underlying principle is, the DM eventually needs to make a ruling, and the players need to accept that that's the ruling. And then I can either live with this, in which case we go on, or I can't live with this, in which case, unfortunately, I need to leave the group. And that's the mature thing to do, rather than trying to, righteously fight for your position and then take other people with you. But anyway, again, I wasn't there, which is why after I kind of laid out what I knew, I said, I don't even know all the details, so let's take this as a hypothetical and say, assume that A, B, and C happened, and how would we handle that? So anyway, hopefully nobody as a player or as a DM listening to this will ever have to deal with anything like that, because nobody wants to argue when you're playing a game. You're there to have fun, right? Okay, so that's all the viewer feedback. Thanks so much, everybody, for viewer feedback. I'm going to take off the +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we'll get into recapping the rules and the various things and instances and stuff that happened with last session, including the Beholder fight. So a couple of things I want to look at before I get into the actual recap. Like I do a lot, I'll try to go over a couple of rules things that came out of a session. The first one I want to look at is casting blindness on a beholder, which that actually came up. And, anti-magic cone aside, it was asked, like, can I throw blindness on a beholder? And so this is, again, one of those instances where the principle of the rules would be what you have to refer to. Okay, so let's go to the blindness spell. I think it's blindness or deafness. Player's handbook. Let's see here. Yep, there we go. Blindness and deafness. Okay. It says, you can blind or deafen a foe, and this is on page 219 of the Player's Handbook. Choose one creature that you can see within range to make a Constitution saving throw. If it fails, the target is either blinded or deafened, your choice for the duration. At the end of each of its turns, your target can make a Constitution saving throw. On a success, the spell ends. When you cast a spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot above 2nd. So it just says target a creature that you can see, and if it fails its Constitution saving throw, it's blinded. That's what it says. So now let's look at the Beholder and see what it says. Condition immunities. Prone. That's it. It doesn't say that it's immune to being blinded or anything like that. I don't see anything in the description. And I don't see anything in the intro text to the Beholder that indicates that it would somehow be immune to blindness, like throwing blindness on it. So the reason it even comes up is you think, the players are like, man, it has all these eyes, right? It's got all these eyes. And I mean, look at the front of the monster manual. I mean, look at all those eyes that this thing has. It's got the big central eye, and then it's got all the eyes on the little eye stalks. So you're like, can I blind that? Well, so that's where you have to understand the underlying principles of the rules. That it says you could target a creature for blindness, and then there's nothing in the beholder's description that says it's immune or resistant or something to blindness. So there you go. There's that's how it works. One other thing I want to mention about beholders before I forget, normally a beholder is CR 13. If you fight it in its lair, because it gets lair actions, it's CR 14. So that's important to know, because they don't mention that in the Out of the Abyss doesn't remind you, hey, you're fighting it in its lair, so make sure to treat it as CR 14, because otherwise you might just award CR 13 experience to your players. So the second thing is jumping, and this ability that monks have it's like Spirit of the Wind, Step of the Wind, Step of the Wind, and jumping. So I want to look at the basic jumping rules, and then I want to look at this Step of the Wind ability that monks have, because it came into play during our session, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. But based on my reading of the rules and the Step of the Wind, and then also the jumping rules, there was a case where this one monk had like 90 feet of movement and was able to jump 3 different times, like 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, combined with 90 feet of movement in one turn, one round, or on their turn. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But, basically looking at the rules, it seems to be legit. So first of all, let's look at the jumping rules for D&D 5e, and I'm sure it's in the player's handbook somewhere. I'm looking on the on the D&D wiki that's referencing the 5e SRD. Jumping, your strength determines how far you can jump. Long jump, when you make a long jump, you cover a number of feet up to your strength score if you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump. Okay, so if your strength is 14, and assuming you can move 10 feet before the jump, then you could jump 14 feet. And that, considered sort of a long jump. When you make a standing long jump without running at least 10 feet before that, you can only leap half that distance. So if your strength was a 14, then you could jump 7. And remember, D&D has specific rounding rules if you need to round that. If you're halving 15 or something like that. Either way, each foot you clear on the jump costs a foot of movement. This rule assumes that the height of your jump doesn't matter, such as a jump across a stream or a chasm. At your DM's option, you must succeed on a DC 10 strength athletics check to clear a low obstacle no taller than a quarter of the jump's distance, such as a hedge or low wall. Otherwise, you hit it. So that's it, the DM's option. When you land in difficult terrain, you must succeed on a DC 10 dexterity acrobatics check to land on your feet. Otherwise, you land prone. So there's the basic jump rules. That's the long jump. The high jump is when you make a high jump, you leap into the air a number of feet equal to 3 plus your strength modifier if you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump. When you make a standing high jump, you can jump only half that distance. So if your strength modifier was 2 and you were doing you're doing a running high jump, then you could jump 5 feet up. If you jumped from standing still and tried to jump up, you could go half that, so half of 5, assuming your strength modifier was 2, because it'd be 3, which is the base jump distance plus your strength modifier. Either way, each foot You clear on the jump, cost a foot of movement. In some circumstances, your DM might allow you to make a strength athletics check to jump higher than you normally can, and you can extend your arms half your height above yourself during the jump. Thus, you can reach above you a distance equal to the height of the jump plus 1 1/2 your height. So that's like you jump, plus you have your height, plus you have your arms are 1/2 your height. So there you go. And I'll just for grins, I'll look here in the player's handbook to see where the jumping rules are in case you want to look it up in the player's handbook. You know, there's the handy dandy index, which I wish all of the D&D books, even the adventure books, had an index. That's one of my main beefs, like Xanathar's and Volo's Guide to Monsters and all that. We don't get an index. I don't even think the Sword Coast Adventurers got an index. So anyway, jumping is, let's see, H-I-J, H-I-J, J, jumping under, C under movement. So now I get to go to movement. The big M, let me go to the big M, and jumping is on page 182 and 190 of the player's handbook. So there you go. Now let's look at Spirit of the Wind, Step of the Wind, I think the name is, which is a monk special ability. One of my monks busted this out. See if I can find it. It's a key ability. You can spend 1 key point to take the disengage or dash action as a bonus action on your turn, and your jump distance is doubled for the turn. So I think this monk, if I remember right, it's a tiefling monk, has a base speed of 45, and if they do Step of the Wind and do dash, so now they've got a total movement of 90 for that round, and their jumping distance is doubled. So they can do a lot with for 1 key point. So I went back and looked, and I was like, does this add up? Because they were like, yeah, I can jump here, and I'm moving 10 feet, and I can da. And in the middle of the adventure, the combat, and all that, I didn't say, well, let's go through and but I did make a mental note, like I want to go look at that, and it seems legit. So you just keep that in mind. I mean, monks, especially as they keep getting abilities, are crazy. I mean, I love monks, don't get me wrong, but they are crazy, and they can get OP real quick. If you have a player that knows what they're doing, and both of them, I have 2 monks in our group, and both of the players know what they're doing. So, there you go. It's crazy. So, okay. So getting back to the recap, when they left, they had just left the Worm Nursery, and they were heading west because they asked me what direction let me take my +3 spectacles of reading rules off. See, they double it, not only as +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, but they're +3 spectacles of reading the rules. So there you go. So they had left the Worm Nursery, and they were headed to the Vast Oblivium, I believe the name of it is, which is 12 miles away from the Worm Nursery, and it's the lair of the Beholder. So let's take a look in the Out of the Abyss book at what it says about the Worm Nursery, or not the Worm Nursery, but going towards the Vast Oblivion. Because actually my notes are still in here because we had to stop the combat mid combat, so I had to make notes there on how everything was. We went, if it gives you an idea, we went like 2.5 hours and did not finish the combat with the Beholder. It's quite a combat. So when they head towards, if you go on page 175 in the Out of the Abyss book, following Vizaran's directions, the characters find the chasm known as the Vast Oblivium, the lair of the Beholder Karazikar, 12 miles from the Purple Worm Nursery. The Beholder created the Vast Oblivium using its disintegration eye ray, which Again, in the monster manual, I think if you read up on beholders, it says that's what they do. They create their own lair that way. This layer consists of a central chasm known as Karazikar's Maw, surrounded by 10 vertical shafts. These are interconnected with horizontal tunnels resembling spokes and honeycombed with small caves used by the beholder's followers and slaves. A web of rope bridges crisscrosses the maw, connecting passages on different levels. So, one thing I'm going to point out right now is that there's a big fill. Another, I do like this adventure, and for the most part, I think Out of the Abyss is a great adventure. I like the products that are being put out for 5th edition, but this right here is a big fail. There are no maps or no diagrams for how this layer is like. You just have to do it. Oh, well, they explain it. I mean, this is a very big encounter. This is a potentially deadly encounter. This is a major encounter, in my opinion, in the adventure. There's no maps. There's no diagrams. There's nothing for how this layer is laid out. Now, I'm going to direct you to go to Elven Tower, as I do often, because they have that Out of the Abyss guide on their website, and they've got some diagrams and pictures and whatnot for how they handled it. And, I really recommend it because you just got to say, okay, well, here's the description they gave me. And so here's how I'm going to do it. And there's nothing, there's no maps or anything. And that's just, I don't understand. Did they run out of time? Did they think that was sufficient? My perspective is, I'm not against homebrew. Homebrew's great. The reason I buy prepackaged, pre-made modules and campaigns, I don't want to do any of that. I don't have time for it, right? And I've mentioned this a couple times before that this particular adventure drops the ball in some cases with that. I've talked about it before. Hopefully, I won't talk about it again. But I do fault them for that. That's a ding. It's like, where's the maps? Where's the diagrams? Where's some guidance on how to handle? Because it's a very weird, intricate kind of layer in a environment to have a battle in, and there's almost certainly a battle because it says killing Karazikar is the only way to claim the Beholder's Central Eye for Vizeron. So, there's going to be a fight, right? So anyway, okay, I don't want to sit there and convetch too much. As they get close to the Vast Oblivium, it says when characters come within a mile of the Vast Oblivium, and this is on page 177 or 176, they feel a growing sense of being watched. They catch glimpses of eyes peering out of the shadows. These eyes close and vanish when anyone tries to focus on them, and adventurers who search for signs of what caused them must succeed on a DC 11 wisdom saving throw or gain 1 level of madness, as per the madness rules in Chapter 2 of Out of the Abyss. Remember, Out of the Abyss has its own kind of way of handling madness. It's almost like the Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu sanity level. The character's tunnel ends at the top of one of the exterior shafts of the Vast Oblivium. So see the Vast Oblivium general feature sidebar. We'll do that here in a second. Characters can use the rope ladders to reach the bottom of the shaft, and from there make their way to the chasm known as Karazikar's Maw. Now, here's the Vast Oblivium general features. This is on page 175. Light. The tunnels and chambers of the Vast Oblivium are dimly lit by glowing fungi and lichen. Bridges. The central chasm of Karazikar's Maw. Karazikar's Maw is 100 feet across. So the tunnel, the chasm, which is really kind of a vertical tunnel, is 100 feet across, spanned by bridges made of gut and zirkwood that are anchored to metal rings in the rock walls of the tunnel entrances. The tunnels are staggered so that the bridges cross over each other at different points. From any bridge, a character can climb or drop 10 feet to reach a bridge leading to a tunnel on an adjacent level. The chasm of and this is the chasm here. The chasm of Karazikar's maw extends some 500 feet below the lowest bridge tunnels, plunging into darkness. A fall into the chasm deals 20d6 bludgeoning damage. Shafts. The 10 vertical shafts around the perimeter of the chasm are each 30 feet wide and 100 feet from top to bottom. They're located 100 feet from the edge of the chasm and connected to it by tunnels. Each shaft features side chambers and small caverns and has rope ladders for Karazikar slaves to move up and down them. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the extent of what you get for how this is all laid out. So, seasoned to taste. Again, I recommend Elven Tower. Go to the Elven Tower website. Look at the entry on the Wormwrithings, because he's diagrammed his interpretation of what it looks like, and even has some pictures of how he did the battle with the miniatures and the bridges and stuff like that. So now by this, it says that the tunnels are staggered so the bridges cross over each other at different points. So it's not all just one central, point where all the bridges cross over. It's one bridge might be on this side, another one that side, and they may cross over on the end or in the middle, or it's kind of a weird, Now, I'll tell you what I did just to make my life easier, because the player's asking all kinds of questions. Where's the bridge above us? Where's the bridge below us? Where's the bridge 3 levels down, 5 levels up? I don't know. So I had to just kind of wing it and do it random. But one thing I did do to make my life easier was all bridges were equidistance, I guess, if you will, or from the side of the chasm pointing inward. So every bridge, no matter what level it was on, the center of the bridge would cross the center of the maw and the chasm. And that's what I did to make my life easier. I just said, look, in the center, all the bridges cross. But from there, it's completely almost random what angle the bridge is at. And they were asking, again, all kinds of questions about these bridges. They wanted to know, how are the bridges made? Well, it just says rope bridges. They're made out of gut and zirkwood, but it doesn't really say, do they have rope handrails? I just said, well, they've got zirkwood planks, and they're made out of this sort of gut rope, and yeah, they have the typical, kind of hand held thingy, extra rope for hands. I didn't know how shaky they were. I didn't know how rickety or sturdy they were. I said, okay, they're not like as shaky as like the Jungle movies where, you're on this rope bridge and it's all crazy. I said, it's fairly, it's fairly stable, right? What else did they ask? Said, how wide across are the bridges? Well, I don't know, because the book didn't tell me. I said they're 10 feet across. I said they did have rope. The bridges were, I did say they have rope handles. They said, are they blocking terrain? As the beholder's moving around and you got all these different bridges and all that, is this block? I don't know. I said, for the most part, no, just to make things easy. I said that the bridges, for the most part, I said, if a special circumstance comes up, maybe. I said, but for the most part, no, they're not blocking terrain. What else was I asked about the bridge? Which direction do the upper and lower bridges go in? It's like, I don't know. I think I said, just to make things easy, the upper bridge was, like perpendicular to the bridge they were on, and the one underneath it was, at an angle. And then I said I had to keep making this up, but at the center, all bridges are in the same spot. And then I ended up, when they would say, well, I'm falling 30 feet, do I hit a bridge, or can I hit a bridge? I would just pick a random number. I say, well, I'll give you whatever % chance. I'd say I'm going to roll a 6-sider, And that's how many levels you drop before you have a chance to grab a bridge, right? That kind of thing. Instead of stopping, and because this chasm is going way up and way down, so instead of diagramming out every possible bridge, I just kind of winged it and made it sort of random, but at the same time made the bridges to be there enough so that the players could take advantage of them on certain cases, or also where it's like, oh, I really wish a bridge was here, but it's not, because I didn't want to sit there and go, well, the 10 feet up is like this, and then 10 feet up is like this, and then 10 feet up. That's tedious and boring. And so I do fault, the designers for that. I had a lot of questions on these bridges that were not in the book. So I just want to point that out. You probably will too. So just think ahead of time, how you want to handle that. But anyway, getting back to this, this thing with the eyes, and, they, as they get close to the lair, they see these eyes looking, and then they look away like, oh, did I see some eyes? And then the eyes look away. That is a common phenomenon. The closer you get to a beholder's lair, it's kind of the madness and the magic and of the beholder. So that's straight out of the monster manual. They adapted it a little bit for Out of the Abyss, where as you can accumulate madness, it goes towards accumulating madness. My players, I had one player, I had a lot of questions like, what are they? And I tried to describe it like they were, it's like you're feeling watched and you feel creepy and you're seeing eyes. And I tried to do it in a way that they really felt like they were being watched. But the way the players reacted, I think most of them realized this was sort of a magical effect of getting close to a beholder, right? Because the beholders are all about the eyes. The eyes, exactly like that, right? So, most of them, I think, just assumed metagaming without really metagaming it, but they knew that this is probably a magical effect. But I did have a couple of players kind of investigate it. I had one ask if they could use a nature check to know if this was a beholder type thing, and I don't know if that was arcane or nature, but I let them do a nature check. Now, one character did, I had 2 or 3 characters like trying to figure it out, and I had them roll. One character did develop madness, and I think they just went catatonic on their lizard, because the main characters are traveling on lizards, so they just went catatonic and nobody even noticed, and they snapped out of it about the time that they got to the shaft. So just keep in mind that the way you describe this effect with the eyes, can be a very creepy wow, where we're about to get into a fight moment, or the players were like, oh, beholder, and I tried my best not to make it seem like just a magical effect, but I think they kind of figured it out anyway. But we still had a little bit of fun with it, so you want to make sure to pay attention to that. Now, what happens is they come to these shafts. Eventually, whatever tunnel they're in the Wormwrithings going towards the Vast Oblivion is going to come to a shaft in the ground that goes down. And if I remember right, it's 30 feet wide by the whatever it said on the general features of the Vast Oblivion. Yeah, the shafts are 30 feet wide and 100 feet from top to bottom. And there's a rope ladder that goes down. And then in these shafts, there's side chambers and small caverns. And the side chambers are for Karazikar's slaves. So that's another thing that the players, when they see these sites, they're like, what's in there? And I'm like, I don't know, bedrolls, meager belongings, that sort of thing. Really, what kind of creatures? Humanoids, humanoid creatures, medium and smaller humanoids, but you're not exactly sure. So again, I'm having to really wing it, because that's the only information that I'm given. Because the Karazikar has, is that how you say his name? Karazikar, yeah, has a lot of slaves. And it breaks down the slaves that he has. On page 177, he has 21 shield dwarf commoners, 17 human commoners, 11 moon elf commoners, 8 female drow and 1 male drow, 5 deep gnomes, 23 goblins, and 15 orogs. I don't even know what an orog is. I have to go look it up. So, and this is like after you beat Karazikar. Like some of them want to be like, you are a ruler now, and here's an opportunity for more NPCs in your expedition. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not happening in my campaign. I'm not dealing with any more NPCs. But if you want to, if you need to replenish your expedition, or if you are having really fun with all the NPCs in this, here's another good opportunity. Now, I've exactly figured out how I'm going to do this, but, in some of these slaves were like born in this lair. Their whole life, that's all they know. Karazikar is literally like their god. They think, that's what they think of him. They're not saying he's a benign god, but that's how they think of him. Now, there's other slaves in here that didn't start their life here, and they know better, and maybe they want to leave, or whatever. But so it's a varying nature to these slaves. Some of them will not be able to function on their own. So, handle that however you want. They're not coming. I mean, maybe the expedition can lead them or out of the Wormwrithings or something, but they're not all coming back to, the Tower of Vengeance. And I've already said that the expedition itself can barely fit in the teleportation from my wand of Underdark teleportation, whatever it is, that I created. Vengeancey Underdark teleportation, specific Vengeancey Underdark, limited Vengeancey Underdark teleportation. So all these slaves couldn't fit in there anyway. So I've got kind of an out right there, unless the players just want to be benign and lead them all out or something. But I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. No pun intended, because there's a lot of bridges in this session. So anyway, they arrive there, and they arrived at the shaft, and they're pretty sure that this is the entrance to the lair for the beholder. And they decided to leave the expedition behind and go down with basically the shield guardian. And the dwarf Thorin, who has Whelm, took his lizard, even though everybody else was like, we're not taking lizards. He took his lizard. So there you go. Before they left sending stones. They took a sending stone, and then they left instructions with Eldith, who's their sort of lieutenant, to send info to King Bruenor about what they know so far, and how the demon lords got to the Underdark, Gromf Bonray's involvement, the Drow Menzoberranzan, the Drow's involvement in all of this. So they're saying, while we're gone, use the sending stones and go ahead and start updating King Bruenor on what's happening here. And they did say, hey, we're just working with an ally on a plan. They didn't mention Vizeron's name, race, class, or what the plan is. So they didn't say, hey, we're working with an embittered Drow Archmage. They just said, hey, we have an ally, we're working on a plan. And they did mention that they were in the Wormwrithings and about to encounter a beholder. So they had all that sent. Eldith is, using the sending stones, because you can only send, I think, up to 25 words at a time or something. So while they're down in the beholder's lair, she's relaying all this information to King Bruenor through the sending stones. So they went down the shaft, and what happens is that when they go down the shaft, again, they go 100 feet down, and they can encounter small side caverns, and they can encounter small sort of little side chambers and small caverns. Fill those into taste. I gave just enough information to realize that there's beings, there's humanoids that seem to be living here beyond just the beholder, and they're assuming slaves, which is true. Okay, so that you get to the bottom of the shaft, and then what happens when you hit the bottom of the shaft? This is on page 176. The characters tunnel into the top of one of the shafts, use rope ladders to reach the bottom of the shaft, and from there make their way to the chasm known as Karazikar's Maw. So you go, I don't even know how far in. It probably mentions somewhere, but I don't see it right in front of me. They're located 100 feet from the edge of the chasm. So when you get to the bottom of the shaft and you go 100 feet, and all of these tunnels leads toward the main chasm, that 100-foot wide chasm that goes up and down, that the beholder is made with his disintegration rays. Now, keep in mind that both at the bottom and at the top of this chasm, there's stuff. Especially at the top is where the treasure chamber is. So anyway, when they get to the chasm itself, that Shedrak meets them, and Shedrak is a mage. Use the mage statistics from the monster manual, and he greets them in the name of his master, the great Karazikar, and he asks their business. Now, Shedrak is chaotic evil. He has 10 small eyes tattooed on his bald head that allow him to see invisible creatures and objects as if they were visible. He carries a non-magical staff topped with a varnished beholder eye. Karazikar can see through this eye and treats it as one of his own eyes for the purpose of its eye rays. Breaking the staff renders the eye inert and prevents Karazikar from using this property. Shedrak carries a potion of healing, a potion of poison, a spell scroll of globe of invulnerability. And it says here, as long as the adventurers are respectful towards Shedrak and his master, and particularly if they claim to carry messages or items of possible interest to the beholder, Shedrak agrees to lead them to Karazikar. If the characters become hostile, Shedrak orders them to depart, lest they provoke the wrath of his all-powerful master. If attacked, he uses his globe of invulnerability scroll, casts fly of himself, and flies into the chasm. Shedrak allows up to 10 party members accompany him, demanding that the rest of the expeditionary force remain behind. So if the expedition had come down the shaft, they would have to lay behind. And then he leads the 10 or smaller group across the bridge into the middle of Karazikar's maul. At which point Karazikar will come descending down, like floating down, and will stay at least 20 feet away from the bridge. And then the whatever audience or whatever happens. Now, I'm actually covering 2 sessions, or I think last time I ended here, but the last video we'll cover all the beholder stuff in the next video. So actually the previous session before this one, we got to that point where the beholder's coming down, and I was like, okay, see you next week. So it was a nice moment to end. So basically, I had, when they first got there, they sort of negotiated with Shedrak, sort of the ambassador of the beholder. And, he's like, what do you have for Karazikar? And is kind of, you can kind of, as a DM, help them, because they're just standing there like, oh, we're ready to fight. And, in order to get the beholder to appear, you've got to, get to a certain point. And the most obvious way, the most efficient, straightforward way to get the beholder to appear is to convince Shedrak that you want to talk to the beholder and you have something of value for the beholder. Now, there's other ways you can have the beholder appear. I mean, you can just have the beholder appear if you want to, like, get out of my lair and start a big fight if you want. But if we're going by how the book's written, then that's kind of how it works. I had, I have that one player who does a lot of crazy stuff, and this time was no different. Shedrak was like, what do you desire of my master? And the player had the character go, we need his eye. And I'm like, oh, really? And the whole all the players like, really? And so the bard immediately went, well, we seek his visions. And Shedrak's like, what? Did you just say you need his eye? And then the bard's like, we seek his visions. And then the wizard, and this worked out really well thematically, because the wizard in our party has the robe of eyes, and also has the lantern that can reveal things. And he stepped forward and started kind of talking too. And so I let the bard do a persuasion roll with advantage, because the other wizard stepped forward that would kind of have something in common with this Shedrak guy, because they're both checking each other's eyes out. Like, that's pretty sweet. And then, so they persuaded him, and he's like, okay, well, so you want his visions? Well, he doesn't give visions. And then the bard is like, well, we just, that's a way of saying we seek his knowledge, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So also during this time, Wave, the Trident, who loves to convert people to sea gods, started trying to talk about Great Shashalis. And, Shedrack was like, there is no god here but Karazikar. Only he is great, and I would not, say that again, or you probably need to leave if you can with your lives. So that they offered knowledge. They said, we have knowledge of what's going on in the Underdark, and they said and they pulled out this black rock, which was a remnant of Gracklestug. If you go into the Whirlstone tunnels, you can encounter that monolith, and there's that black rock. I think you get a black rock from another part, and it can join with a monolith. Anyway, that monolith can teleport you outside of Gracklestug, and they said, this has teleportation properties in the Underdark, and says Shedrack's like, okay, and they go out on the bridge. Down comes the Beholder. The negotiations don't last very long. They end up offering the Black Rock. There's a thing in this chapter you need to read up on. The Beholder is very interested in what he calls a maze engine. And this is going to come into play later in this adventure. It's this area that can reshape reality, kind of, or this thing that can reshape reality. And so he keeps trying to capture Modrons, because Modrons evidently know about this thing. And the Beholder at one point even said, do you have information on the maze engine? And the players didn't catch that at all. Now they don't have to. They're going to get there sooner or later anyway, but it's kind of a interesting way to seed that. But the players didn't seem, to catch up on it. Now, another thing, this Beholder can only do deep speech and undercommon. So that's another dynamic of this conversation. So the bard who can speak undercommon is offering information on the demon lords and this and that and the other. And the Beholder's like, you think I don't already know this stuff? Like, what do you have for me? And they're like, well, we have this black rock. And he was like, okay, well, that buys you another 5 minutes of life. What else do you have for me? And then they're like, the Shield Guardian. And he's like, well, that will buy you another 5 minutes of life. What do you have for me? And so the players are kind of at a loss, because they're trying to do is get the Beholder to come closer. And I think I already said he was like staying 60 feet away or something like that. And so they're getting frustrated. And they said, well, we'll give them the Shield Guardian too. And the Beholder's like, okay, well, then do that. Take the amulet. I'm not an idiot. I know what a Shield Guardian is. Take the amulet and give it to Shedrack, and let's, get this over with. And then he said, that should be enough to allow you to depart my realm with your lives, but, you're wearing me thin. And so they did this thing where, they were taking the amulet up for the Shield Guardian, and the Shield Guardian was following them. And then they got near Shadrach, whatever his name is, and said attack. And then, so they surprise attack Shadrach, and then the fight started and all that. Now, I'm not going to go blow by blow on this fight. Suffice it to say, they fought this Beholder at least 2 hours, and they're not done yet. So next session, they're still going to be fighting the Beholder, and we'll wrap up the Beholder's lair at that point with the slaves and treasure and this and that and the other. But I'll make a couple more points on the Beholder. And now Shedrack, it says that he should cast the Globe of Invulnerability and then cast Fly and then fly off into the chasm. You can't do that, because I think both Fly and Globe of Invulnerability are concentration spells. So you can't do that. And Elven Tower caught that. So I just wanted to pass that along. You could do it if you just want, but by the rules, you're not supposed to be able to do that. I will say that the way the initiative order rolled, both monks got to roll up on Shedrack before he got a chance to go, and Shedrack got dropped like a bad habit. The Beholder, of course, didn't. Beholder is maintaining his distance, using eye rays, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. There's tactics in the book for the Beholder. They say that, the first thing he tries to do is use the disintegration ray on a portion of the bridge to try to get some of the players to plummet. I ruled instead that because the Shield Guardian is a large creature, which would occupy, that kind of size, that he did a disintegrate ray on the Shield Guardian, which it didn't wipe out the Shield Guardian, but the Shield Guardian took the brunt of that disintegration ray, instead of trying to wipe out a portion of the bridge. Now, the way I've done the slaves up to this point is that the players have kind of seen them peeking out of tunnels and watching, but they haven't gotten a really good look at the slaves. But it does say Karazikar's slaves fearfully scatter during any confrontation. But if Shedrack is alive, he protects his god as best he can, god in quotes. If the beholder is reduced to 45 or fewer hit points, it attempts to flee, ordering Shedrack, if he's still alive, to cover its retreat. When the beholder is reduced to 0 hit points, its corpse slowly sinks, falling 10 feet at the start of every turn until it reaches the bottom of the chasm. A character within reach of the beholder can use an action to gouge out its central eye. There's also a 10% chance at the end of each turn that the beholder's corpse lands on a bridge. So that's where you want to get to, where ultimately you want to get to. And on page 177 again, it does say killing Karazikar is the only way to claim the beholder's central eye. You can't bargain it. You can't trick it. I mean, if the players come up with a stupendously amazing plan, sure, but they're saying basically you got to fight the beholder to get the eye. So I've already explained how I kind of handle the bridges. I made it kind of a random rolling thing. The bridge is immediately up and immediately down. And then as they were climbing up and down, I would go ahead and determine which angle and direction the bridge was. But if they're like, hey, we're falling, can I grab a bridge? I'd be like, well, within 5 levels, you have a chance to hit a bridge or grab a bridge or something like that based on a D6 roll. I mean, just kind of make life easy on yourself. I'll look at the beholder itself is a good fight. Now, I will say that a couple of things are working in the player's advantage, and that is because by the rules, if you go read, and I definitely recommend you study up on the beholder if you're not already really familiar with how beholder works, but its eye stalks are supposed to be random, and it fires 3 in one turn. It can bite and fire 3 eye stalks. And its eye stalks are supposed to be random, and there's 10 of them. So you roll a d10 to determine which eye stalk shot off. So what I did for my players is first I would roll who's going to get targeted. And then the second thing I would do is roll the d10 to determine which eye ray it was. And so that's how I did that. And that's kind of working to their advantage, because if I'm just like, well, I'm just going to pick out that one player and disintegrate ray and innervate ray and, all these other, I mean, this thing has some nasty rays. Some of them which can just outright kill you. Some of them can charm you. Some of them can weaken you. Some of them, there's like a telekinesis one that it can grab you and restrain you and move you up to 30 feet. And that's a great one in this fight, because you can telekinesis somebody and then take them 30 feet out so that they're over the chasm, and on the beginning of his next turn it lets go and down they go. That actually happened to a monk, but this monk had, I don't know if it's because it was a tiefling or a monk, but they had slow fall, so it wasn't, and they dropped, and that's where they did that 90 foot of movement and all the jumping and everything with the spirit of the wind. We were talking about step of the wind or whatever, and they were like jumping back up. At one point, rope trick got thrown, which, so I'm using this anti-magic cone, various ways for the beholder. At the beginning of this turn, it can determine which way it's looking and if it's on or not. That's a real easy way to take care of stuff like rope trick, because all it has to do is point its anti-magic cone at the extra dimensional entrance and exit for rope trick, and it closes it up. Now, it didn't come to that point in our fight yet, but I know I can do that if I want. Another thing you want to keep in mind with this beholder is when it points its anti-magic cone, when it looks and does a 150-foot anti-magic cone, then its own rays are affected by that. So what I would do when I would roll randomly to see who was going to get hit by an eye ray, I wouldn't include people who were in the anti-magic cone, because the beholder is not going to target them. So it's just some things to keep in mind. Other questions about the beholder, they were saying, what color are the rays? And I'm like, it doesn't actually say in the beholder description, but it, some of my players are like, oh, well, in 5th edition, the rays are this color and that color and this color. So either look it up or make it up or whatever if you get asked that, or if you want to describe the eye rays. Another thing, don't forget that this beholder has legendary actions and lair actions. This is why it gets a CR 14 in its lair instead of CR 13. If it's in its lair, on initiative count 20 of every turn, it can take a lair action, and there's like 3 different lair actions. One is opening up an eye on a random surface and shooting it on an eye beam. Another one is on walls; these tentacles come out. Another one is it can make a certain amount of area kind of slippery, gooey, makes it difficult terrain. And those fire off on initiative count 20 of every turn. And you have to use all 3 before you can use another one again. So you can't do like the I-beam one 2 in a row, right? You've got to go through all 3, and then you can start picking and choosing again. So, I guess technically you could use the same one twice in a row, but it would be I've used 1, 2, 3, and then that resets. You can start using whichever one you want because you've used all 3, and then you would use that last one again. So you'd use that last one twice in a row, if that makes sense. But you can't just do the same one over and over and over every turn. But take advantage of Karazikar's, he can fly, and he's got that anti-magic cone. I mean, they threw Hunger of Hadar on him, which is a sphere of darkness and all kinds of craziness. And in that anti-magic cone, it wasn't there, So remember that anti-magic cone's in effect. This thing, the beholder can move up, it can move down, it can 3-dimensional, use it to its advantage, because this should be a tough fight. Now, if you want to make it even tougher, just say, hey, I'm going to use whatever I-beams I want, and not make it, random. Another thing, it has the legendary actions. So at the end of somebody else's turn, it can shoot eye rays up to 3 times. Legendary actions. Beholder can take 3 legendary actions using the eye ray option below. It can only take 1 legendary action at a time, and only at the end of another creature's turn. The beholder regains spent legendary actions at the start of its turn. In the eye ray, it uses 1 random eye ray. So eye rays. The beholder shoots 3 of the following magical eye rays at random. Reroll duplicates, choosing 1 to 3 targets it can see within 120 feet of it. So it could also, it looks like, it can target, it can either do 1 eye ray on 1, or 3 on 1, or 1 on 3 different targets, or 2 on 1 and 1 on another. I just had it targeting 1 at a time with its eye rays. But so it can shoot 3 on its turn, and then it's got legendary actions throughout the rest of the round where it can do 3 more. So it can do 6 eye rays in 1 round, and it gets the lair actions. Its armor class is 18. It's got that anti-magic cone. It's got good saving throws. This thing is a nasty opponent, and this should be a hard fight, because this is one of the main ingredients that you need for that ritual that Viseron's going to do. So anyway, use this beholder and study those eye rays, and they can be a lot of fun. Now, as I said, a couple of things that were working in my favor of my party is, 1, I was doing it random, like the book says. 2, they were making their saving throws. In a couple of instances, they didn't. Now, I did manage to kill a 1 hit point familiar. That was great, an owl. But other than that, everybody's still in the game. Now, there's people getting zapped around. The shield guardian's taking a little bit of a beating. Some other people got nailed or slowed or whatever, taking some damage. But for the most part, they're hanging in there. But we're not done with the fight yet. I had one really cool action where Grimy, the Dwarven rogue, really went out of his way to climb up and up and up, and was waiting for the beholder to get into a position, because he had a grappling hook and a rope, and he was climbing and doing all this cool stuff. And he wanted to swing towards the beholder on the rope, And then, because he's got that vial of purple worm poison. If you remember a couple of videos back, we talked about him milking the purple worm. And he wanted to throw that vial in the beholder's mouth. So the way I handled that was I said, give me an athletics check on that rope to get close enough, or acrobatics, either one, to get close enough to the beholder. If that's successful, then you can melee attack. And if the melee attack's successful, then you'll get the poison in its mouth. So he missed the first time. I think that the swing went wide. He missed his athletics or acrobatics check, but so he back up. So he's going to try again. So that was kind of fun. And at the very end of the fight, we took pictures of where everything was at, and the monk that has a sunblade, who's basically a Jedi, also has flight cast on him now. So he's a flying monk with a lightsaber, basically. So that's going to be fun, and that'll help them, because one of the main advantages this beholder has is it can stay out of range of the melee people, right? But now this monk can fly up to him, so it should be pretty fun. We'll finish. So far, nobody's really super in danger of dying, but that could change quickly, especially if they stop doing so well on their saving throws. So I think that's it on this. This has turned into quite a long video. Thing is, really study this, and we'll finish talking about the beholder's lair and the slaves and all that stuff. There's a Modron prisoner here where they can potentially get information about the maze engine, which is going to be coming up. There's other stuff going on here, but have fun with this fight. It should be a hard fight, but make sure to think ahead. How are you going to lay out the chasm and the bridges, and how do you want to do the beholder and all that stuff? And go study up on that beholder's monster manual entry. So anyway, that's it for this time. Thanks so much for watching, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays. Please leave a thumbs up and maybe a comment on this video as well. That helps me out tremendously. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays as we behold how this fight ends.
Some fearless knight. What a chicken!
If he was any more chicken, he'd sprout drumsticks.
Oh! What's that? That must be the beholder.